So, I've got a pretty decent whiskey collection. Now, I'm not saying it's as big as some folks here in Kentucky, but I've got a few bottles worth showing off. Before I go adding more to the shelf, I need to finish off some of the ones I already have. You know, my friend and Bourbon Hall of Famer, Freddie Johnson, always says bourbon is more than just a drink. It's about the stories we create while sharing it with others. Each episode of Last Pour is my way of honoring that idea by sharing the stories behind the bottles as I enjoy their very last pour. And today's guest of honor is the Experimental Collection from Limestone Branch. It's a rye whiskey single barrel, and I got this from the ABV Network with my buddy Steve Akley. Let's go ahead and give this a pour. It's actually like half of a pour left, not even a full pour, but that's okay. About half a pour. A little bit about Limestone Branch, if you don't know anything about them. They're in Lebanon, Kentucky, and they've built their reputation on creativity and craftsmanship. And this Experimental Collection rye whiskey single barrel is no exception. As I mentioned before, this bottle came to me through Steve Akley, the owner of the ABV Network. This was a barrel pick of theirs in the early days. And so this is how I got this, and I've held on to it for several years. I was trying to look on here to see how old it was, but I don't see when it was bottled. But I've had this for several years, and I've been kind of hesitant to finish this thing off because it was so delicious. But when I smell this, and it takes me back to my original entry into the bourbon industry when I was working with Steve on a film called Kindred Spirits. That's where I met Stephen Beam, the owner of Limestone Branch. Got to know a little bit about how he got in the industry, got to know his team a little bit. Through that, I also got to meet Stephen Fonte, their brand ambassador. Got to meet Derek Mattingly, their cocktail specialist there. Super awesome team there. And if you know anything about Stephen Fonte, I always tell people he should be voted the voice of bourbon. And take a listen and tell me if you agree with me.
So here we are in the history hallway. And in the history hallway, we're going to give you a background of how the Beams and the Dant family members are integrated, mama's side, daddy's side of the family. We're going to give you some history about the different distilleries, the J.W. Dant Distillery, the old Trump Distillery, and generations of bourbon influencers way before us, folks that were distillers, and that background and history of distillation in the state of Kentucky.
What'd I tell you? That guy has the voice for bourbon. So they have a pretty good team there. I'm super excited. I get to know them and call them friends. And every time I sip this, take a pour out of this, I think about all those times that I got to spend with them working on that film. And subsequently, I've got to work with them on a few other things. So, but let's dive into this. This thing, right off the bat, I either get mint or dill on a lot of ryes that I drink. And this one, for sure, it's a little bit different. This has a lot of mint to me, but it also is super sweet, which brings, it almost tastes like double mint gum whenever I taste this, and it just lingers for me. Kind of like the first episode when we talked about Marshmallow Black Belt. Don't get your hopes up, because this was a single barrel, and I'm sure this was out in like 2018, 2019, something like that. So it's long gone. And I'm sorry I keep doing this to you guys. We talk about bottles that don't exist anymore, but man, that's the beauty of this. And this is bottles like this Experimental Collection is why I got into whiskey in the first place, because you'll find a bottle like this and you know you're never going to taste it again. You're never going to have this same exact profile again. And it's chasing that stuff for me is what keeps keeps me interested in whiskey. A lot of people chase different things and chase these high dollar bottles, but for me, it's about finding these unique expressions that I'll never ever have again. I'll have something similar, but never the same thing. And just FYI, this one was called the ABV Angels Share. That was the name of this single barrel. Of course, it has that spiciness of a rye that you would expect. But man, that mint is so like almost overpowering, but in a good way. The finish is lingering. It just stays on the palate. Limestone Branch used to have this program called the Experimental Collection Program. And what happened is they had this metal container in the back of the distillery. And what they would do is put, I think, 10 or 15 gallon barrels in there. And each barrel was a different expression. And so it was something that I guess they weren't going to, put a whole lot of stock into it unless they did some experimentation on it. So they would put out these experimental collections, and what it was is it was 10 to 15 gallon barrels, and at any time you could go into the distillery and you could pick up a 375 liter of one of their experimental expressions. So every time you went in there, it might be a bourbon that was made with certain different grains, or it might be a rye whiskey, or just something completely different, but you could always find something super unique. And they stopped this program, and I wish they hadn't. And Stephen Beam, if you're listening, Stephen Fonte, you have some pull, bring this program back. It was such an awesome program. So last sip, cheers to my buddy Steve Akley. Cheers to the team at Limestone Branch. Cheers to experimental collections like this, that from time to time you stumble on these and it surprises you, but it helps you remember why you got into whiskey. So cheers, everybody. That's it for Last Pour. Whether it's your first favorite or your latest discovery, make sure you enjoy it while it lasts. See you next time.